Carbohydrates. So if we look at the prefix carbo, this lets us know that these molecules are going to be containing carbon, and hydrate also lets us know that this is going to be containing hydrogen. So you'll see carbon, hydrogen, and also oxygen within these molecules. Carbohydrates are an organic compound, since they contain that carbon, made of sugar molecules. So when you think of sugar molecules, you don't always think of carbohydrates, but all carbohydrates are made out of sugar monomers. So if we look at the term monosaccharide, these are our simplest carbohydrates, and mono means one, saccharide means sugar, so monosaccharides are our simple sugars with one sugar unit. So again, these are our simplest carbohydrates. The main examples include glucose, fructose, and galactose. You've probably heard of glucose before as a type of sugar. So glucose is what is mainly the fuel supply for plants and animals. How it comes together and forms different molecules is how it is stored within the body or within a plant. And these are our structural examples. So here is glucose, which is has a 5-carbon backbone, galactose, which is very similar to glucose, also with that 5-carbon backbone, and fructose, which is instead a pentagon with a 4-carbon backbone. However, they all contain the same formula, the same base formula of C6H12O6. Often when you're looking at pictures of organic molecules, you'll see only something like this represented. And what it's meaning is, if it's an organic molecule, anywhere we've got a bend like this is indicating a carbon molecule. So they do not always draw in those carbon molecules. So here's my base structure of a glucose, and these are where these carbons are going to be located. So as you can see, it's often represented by just this type of simple structure. So if you see anything like that in your text or in a reading, that is what it is representing. Next up are our disaccharides. Di meaning two, saccharide meaning sugar. So these are our sugars formed from two of our monomers, either glucose, fructose, or galactose. And in order to form these molecules, we must go through a dehydration reaction. If you remember, a dehydration reaction puts together two molecules by releasing a water molecule. So as you can see here, we have a glucose covalently bonded to a fructose, and it was done that way through a dehydration reaction. The glucose and fructose disaccharide combo is a sucrose molecule. Sucrose is common table sugar. Another common disaccharide you may have heard of is lactose. That is glucose and galactose, and that is the sugar found in milk products. Last of the carbohydrates are the polysaccharides. So if we look at the prefix poly, that means many, and saccharide, sugar. So these are your complex carbohydrates. These are your largest carbohydrates, or large polymers. And we're going to combine multiple units of glucose, fructose, or galactose. Normally it's glucose, in order to create these molecules. We have three main examples. The first one is starch. Starch is the simplest of the polysaccharides, or complex carbohydrates. And starch is found in plant cells. And these are long chains of glucose monomers. So as you can see, glucose, 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 and they're all put together by dehydration reactions. And these are what you commonly find in potatoes, rice, corn. They have large starch complexes. Next up is glycogen. And glycogen is how animals store excess sugars. This is mainly within the liver. So if you see here, we've got branched chains. So starch had the single chains, the single unit chains. The glycogen has these branched chains of our glucose. And finally, cellulose. Cellulose is the most complex of our polysaccharides, And these are highly branched rope-like structures. So cellulose is very complex. This is also found in plants. If you think of celery, those long stringy parts that are hard to bite through on the celery, that is composed of cellulose. So these really help with the building of plants. They give the plant structure because they have all of that, that building material there. However, humans cannot digest cellulose. We do not have the enzymes in order to do that. It's too complex of a molecule. However, other organisms like cows are able to digest cellulose, so we are able to harvest that glucose energy by eating a cow that had eaten the grass with the cellulose in it. Okay, next up on our macromolecules are lipids. And lipids are fats, so they are very hydrophobic, and that is actually very important to their function. So if you think of oil and water, they do not mix, and that is because oil is a type of lipid, and it's hydrophobic, so it does not mix with the water. Lipids are fats that can store energy. So if you think of energy reserves within your body, those are sometimes considered fats as well as proteins and muscle tissue. They can act as an insulation or cushion for your major organs. In humans, in all cells, they provide cellular structure, and they can also form biological signals. So one of our main types of lipids are triglycerides, and triglycerides compose about 90% of the lipids within a human's diet. And these triglycerides are fats that have a glycerol backbone, which is a 3-carbon backbone, and 3 fatty acids attached. So some examples of triglycerides are saturated fats. So here again, here's the glycerol backbone, it goes here, and then you have the fatty acids. And if you can see here, this is a saturated fat, and that is because we have all single bonded carbons. It is completely saturated with hydrogens. The other type is an unsaturated fat. So as you can see a definite structural difference here. Here's our glycerol backbone, our 3-carbon glycerol backbone. But if we look at this fatty acid tail here, we can see that there are double bonded carbons. And that means that it is unsaturated. It is not fully saturated with all of the hydrogens that it can handle. So if you often see a model of an unsaturated fat, they will have bends because the double bonds cause bends within the molecules. These are normally thought of as your healthier fats. For example, they are found in olive oils, vegetable oils, that type of thing. So our fatty acids, whenever we look at them, we've got those saturated fatty acids that have all single bonds, no double bonds. And then we have, if you're thinking of your diet, monosaturated and polysaturated fats. Monosaturated fats, or one, mean they have one double bond. And these are most of your plant oils, like olive oil. Our polyunsaturated fat are fats that have more than one double bond. So these are your omega-3s and 6s that you might find in animals like salmon. So when they say you need your good fatty acids, your omega-3s, that's what you find in salmon. Then we also have lipids that make up the structure of our cells and our cellular organelles. So whenever you see a phospholipid, that is this structure here, it has a polar head, and that polar head has a phosphate group and a choline that makes it polar. So it is able to stick out towards the water molecules within a cell or outside of a cell. And then you have these fatty acid tails. So since they are composed of lipids, they are non-polar. So they actually point away from the water. So anytime you look at a cell and you look at a cellular membrane, you'll see a double membrane or a bilayer. And so here's one of our lipids, and it's pointing in towards another lipid. So the phosphates are on the outside near the water since they are hydrophilic, And the fatty acid tails point in towards one another since they are hydrophobic. Another type of lipid are steroids. So whenever you see a steroid, these have 4 carbon ring structures, and they are also hydrophobic, so that is why they're considered a lipid. And many of your steroids are chemical signals, which we call hormones. So here's an example of one. Here's our 4 carbon rings. This is cholesterol, and here is cholesterol within our phospholipid bilayer. So here's those phospholipids that surround the cells and the cell organelles, and here's the cholesterol. And in animal cells, the cholesterol gives those cells some structure. A final type of lipid are waxes. And waxes, if you think of a plant material, they form that wax on the outside of their leaves to help hold in water. That is a final example of lipids.